Hi, welcome back. I hope you've had time to do some digging and some looking at the book of Esther. And as I said last week, we didn't get finished with it. I thought we would, but it's such an interesting story. So I wanted to finish that this week. Incredible heroine. Incredible what she was going to do. So we were talking last week about how Haman's plot to destroy the Jews. It wasn't just Mordecai that he wanted to kill. It was all of the Jews. Now, that's racist. That's hatred. It's a horrible situation that you want to annihilate a people. But this has been the Jewish people have had to deal with this for centuries upon centuries upon centuries. And I think a lot of it comes about because they are God's chosen people, and as such, they have special favor with him, and people are jealous. Jealousy is one of the most hideous sins there is, as far as I'm concerned. That's the gospel according to Margie. But I think that when we have jealousy in our hearts, it can take over. If we don't bring that before the Lord and lay it down and get rid of it, it will take over and it will destroy us. And so this is what I believe was one of the things that was going on with Haman. He was jealous. He was jealous of Mordecai sitting in the gate. He was jealous of Mordecai doing all this stuff. And he was angry that Mordecai was a Jew. And he dared to defy Haman. And as I said last week, we don't know why Mordecai refused to bow before Haman. It could have been the personal conflict going on between them. It could have been that Haman was wearing an emblem of some kind on his chest, like a necklace, like a medallion of some kind, that was idolatrous. But for whatever reason, Mordecai refuses to bow down before Haman. Maybe he just flat out doesn't like him. But this is very dangerous. Now, we have the same thing going on in the book of Daniel, where Daniel refuses to bow. And so what we have here then is a continuation of the story of Esther. And so last week I was talking about Mordecai and how Mordecai told him all that was happened and money and the exact amount of money that Haman had promised to pay to the king's treasurers for destruction of the Jews. He also gave her a copy of the text of the edict which had been issued in Susa for their destruction, that he might show Esther and inform her and to order her to go into the king to implore her favor with the king. But there's a little bit of caveat there that Mordecai maybe doesn't know about. Maybe he doesn't know that Esther hasn't been into the king for a month. He has this little chickie going in and bringing him great favor and whatever's going on there. And so she's saying, okay, if the king doesn't call for me and I go in on my own, he could say, off with her head, and I'm done. I'm absolutely done before I can even get out the petition that you want me to take to him. Before I can say a word, I'm whisked off to the gallows and hung or killed or whatever, however they decide to do it. So this is risky. And so this is where she said to her uncle, all right, okay, I'll do it. But everybody has to fast. Not just you. And not just me, but everybody, all the Jews, all the people that everyone has to fast because this is life and death for all of us. And so she decides to do it. And then in verse 5, she says, chapter 5, so now on the third day, the Esther put on her royal robes and stood in the inner court of the king's palace in front of the king's rooms. And the king was sitting on his royal throne in the throne room opposite the entrance to the palace. And it happened, when the king saw Esther the queen standing in court, she obtained favor in his sight, and the king extended to Esther the golden scepter which was in his hand. Now, I don't have a scepter, and it's not gold, but I have this. Now, my daughter-in-law gave me this. I thought it was sweet. Life and death. Something so simple as a little scepter. It's a royal scepter, but this is what meant she gets to live. Now, can you imagine what it was like for her to walk past the guards who undoubtedly tried to stop her, to walk past everyone that was in there, and to stand before the king in her royal robes? And when he looks at her, he sees her. He sees her beauty. He sees her elegance. He sees the pleasure she's brought to him. It just all comes back. Just like, you know how we say, you see your life flashes before your eyes just before you die. Well, I think in my mind, probably the pleasure and the joy that she's brought him over the years flashes before his eyes as he sees her, and he smiles and he reaches out the scepter, and she is free. She can go in. And so when she does, this is the thing she has to do. She can't just walk in and say, hey, this is going down. Haman is wanting to kill me. I mean, she can't just say it. She has to present it in such a way that it's acceptable. So remember what I said earlier, what I said last week about the 2-day banquet thing? You know, one day they have the banquet and the drinking and everything, and then the next day they go over again what they talked about and what they'd agreed upon and everything. So she decides that she's going to have this banquet for the king. But the banquet is going to be for the king, Haman, and herself. So in verse 4, chapter 5, verse 4, Esther said, if it please the king, may the king and Haman come this day to the banquet that I prepared for him. Then the king said, bring Haman quickly, that we may do as Esther desires. So the king and Haman came to the banquet which Esther had prepared. Pretty good deal. I mean, you know, who of us doesn't like Mama's cooking? And I don't think she cooked it, but she knew what he liked. She knew his desires. And so she had prepared for him, undoubtedly, whatever his favorite foods were. And then she was inviting Haman in too, who still has no idea that she is a Jew. The king does not know she's a Jew. Only she and Mordecai know that she's a Jew. And so they go to her quarters, and they have the food and they drink their wine at the banquet. And verse 6, and the king said to Esther, what is your petition? For it shall be granted to you. And what is your request? Even to half the kingdom it shall be done. Up to half the kingdom, I'll give it to you. You know, this was a statement that was made throughout the Middle East. I'm like, what do you want? You want half my house? Okay, it's yours. You want half my money? Okay, it's yours. You want half my kingdom? Okay, it's yours. I mean, it was just this caveat of, okay, whatever you want, I'll give it to you because you've brought me such pleasure. But do they really mean it? Think about Salome when she danced before Herod and what that cost John the Baptist. But anyhow, so he says to her, whatever you want. What do you want? Tell me, what do you want? It's like, I can't stand it anymore. Tell me what you want. And so she says, what I want, what I really, really want, is I want for you to come back tomorrow. You and Haman, to come back tomorrow and have dinner with me again. And then I'll tell you what I want. I'll tell you the whole story. And so I want you to come back. So, anyhow, Haman went out. He was so excited. I mean, he's rocking. He's got this thing going. He's a buddy of the king, and the queen's invited him in for dinner, and everything's going great. I mean, he is John Travolta revisiting Persia. Off he's gone. He is having a great time, and he is proud. Oh my, he's so proud. But what comes before a fall? Pride. And so Haman's pride, he goes out, he's excited, he goes home, he brags to his wife. And verse 12, he says, even Esther the queen, let no one but me come with the king to the banquet, which she prepared. And tomorrow also I'm invited by her with the king. Yet this all doesn't satisfy me. Because when I see Mordecai sitting at the king's gate, I just get so mad I can't stand it. And his wife, Zeresh, said to him, have a gallows 50 cubits high made, and in the morning ask the king to hang Mordecai on it, and then go joyfully with the king to the banquet. And the advice pleased Haman so that he had the gallows made. I mean, you listen to his wife. He had the gallows made 50 cubits high. I mean, he is going to hang him high and dry for everybody to see. This is what happens to the man who does not bow down before me. And then this is where, between the two banquets, is where the king can't sleep, and he needs a bedtime story. It's here. And so he calls for his servants to come in, and they read him the story of Bigtan and Teresh, and tell him that was Mordecai the Jew, who saved you. And he said, what did we do for him? What did we give him? What was his reward? He saved me. Surely there was a reward for him. What did we do for him? And they all said, nothing. At least it's not written in the book. We didn't do anything for him. And the king says, well, okay, we got to solve this. So the next morning then is when Haman comes in. Haman is so excited. He comes in, and the king says to him, says, it says, so Haman came in verse 6, chapter 6, verse 6. So Haman came in, and the king said to him, what is to be done for the man whom the king desires to honor? What shall we do for the man whom we want to give great glory to? Now, Haman, it's got to be me. It's me. He wants to give glory to me. It's me. It's me. Oh, dear Lord, it's me. He's so excited about this whole thing. So he decides that what he should tell the king is, verse 8 says, let them bring a royal robe which the king has worn, and the horse on which the king has ridden, and on whose head a royal crown has been placed. And let the robe and the horse be handed over to one of the king's most noble princes, and let them array the man whom the king desires to honor, and lead him on horseback through the city square, and proclaim before him, thus it shall be done to the man whom the king desires to honor. I mean, can you visualize this? Da-da-da, da-da-da. And they're going before the guy on the horse, the town crier. This is what happens to the man whom the king desires to honor. This is the man who the king loves. This is the man who the king wants to give great glory to. Can you imagine that going through? And how proud Haman is. He's so excited. He's so proud that he is going to be taken through the streets of Susa on the king's horse, wearing the king's royal robes. And oh, what a glorious day that will be for him. And the king says, good idea, Haman. Great idea. I'm so glad you thought that up. Let's do it. Get Mordecai in here. And they bring Mordecai in, and the king says to Haman, this man is the man whom I want to honor. It is Mordecai, because he saved my life. Whew. Talk about falling from glory. Woo-hoo. Haman just must have flipped out. So they do this. They put on all this royal garb on Mordecai and put him on the king's steed. And they go through the city, and it is Haman who is crying out to the crowd, this is the man who the king wants to honor. This is the man who the king brings great glory to. And according to Jewish tradition, Haman's daughter is up second floor. She's watching all this. She thinks it's Mordecai leading her dad on the horse. And so she dumps the chamber pot. And when it hits Haman's head, he looks up to see who did it. She sees it's her father, and she falls from the window and dies. Do with that what you want to. But that's what the tradition is. Okay, Haman is in trouble. He's in real serious trouble. So then Mordecai returned to the king's gate, but Haman hurried home, mourning with his head covered. He goes home to Zeresh, his wife, and all his friends in verse 13. And then his wise men and Zeresh, his wife, say to him, if Mordecai, before whom you have begun to fall, is of Jewish origin, you will not overcome him, but will surely fall before him. We can go back to Genesis 12:3. Those who bless my people, I will bless. Those who curse my people, I will curse. Haman has cursed Mordecai and the Jewish people as a whole. And so Zeresh, who the day before said, build the gallows, build it high, now says, Haman, you will die. And that's just the way it's going to go down. So now it's time for the second banquet with Esther. And so here comes the king and Haman. And Esther's ready. She's prayed up, she's fasted. Now she's ready to present her petition to the king. In chapter 7, verse 3 says, Then Queen Esther answered and said, If I have found favor in your sight, O king, and if it please the king, let my life be given me as my petition and my people as my request. For we have been sold, I and my people, to be destroyed, to be killed and annihilated. Now, if we had only been sold as slaves, men and women, I would have remained silent, for the trouble would not be commensurate with the annoyance to the king. And the king Ahasuerus asked Esther, What are you talking about? What do you mean you've been sold? Who sold you? Who had the right to sell you? Who did this? And what do you mean your people? You and your people. You mean your family? And she said, I'm a Jew. And so she went ahead and she reiterated the plot again to the king. He goes out on her balcony, which is mirapesset in Hebrew. He goes out on her balcony just to get some air. I mean, this thing came down hard and fast, and he's got to think it through. Now, this is the part that's really good. So, the king asked, when he goes outside, he's on the balcony, he's getting fresh air, and Haman stayed inside to beg for his life. Now, Queen Esther's on her chaise lounge when she's told him this. I mean, they're at dinner, they're relaxed, they're comfortable. And so she's lying there on a chaise, and Haman just over her, begging, please, don't kill me. The coward, he's just going to kill all the Jews because he can't stand one Jew. So he's going to kill them all. And now the little runt, what's he doing? He is falling across Esther's lap, begging, please, don't kill me, don't. And the king comes back in, and he is livid. He's had a few minutes to think about it. He is livid, and now he sees Haman laying across the queen, and he thinks he's trying to molest her. And so he says to his servants, they're out with him now, take him out. They covered Haman's face. Now this is what they would do when they're going to hang someone. They covered Haman's face, and they took him outside, and they hung him on the same gallows that Zeresh, his wife, had suggested that he build for the Jew, for Mordecai. Pretty good justice, isn't it? So then we go on chapter 8, and we see that Mordecai is promoted. Mordecai is promoted by King Ahasuerus, and he and Esther are given all of Haman's property. Whatever he had, his home, his animals, whatever he had now belongs to Mordecai and Esther to share, although Esther stays in the castle. But it's theirs. It's an inheritance for their progeny. And so what we see then is Esther comes back before the king and says, thank you, basically gives her thanks for this, but there's an issue still. And so, chapter 8, verse 3, Then Esther spoke again to the king, fell at his feet, wept, and implored him to avert the evil scheme of Haman the Agagite and his plot which he had devised against the Jews. And the king extended the golden scepter, not gold, but scepter, and to Esther. And so Esther arose and stood before the king. And then she said, If it pleases the king, and if I have found favor before him, and the matter seems proper to the king, and I am pleasing in his sight, let it be written to revoke the letters devised by Haman, the son of Hammedatha the Agagite, which he wrote to destroy the kingdom, the Jews who are in the king's provinces. So, for how can I endure to see the calamity which shall befall my people, and how can I endure to see the destruction of my kindred? Okay, so now there's an issue here. The king gave the decree, and according to what he says next, he can't reverse the decree. However, he's king, and he could have done it. But the thing was, he needed the money. He still needs the money. Taking care of Haman doesn't solve the money issue. He still needs the money for his coffers, which are empty from all these wars that he's been in. So how is he going to solve this problem? So he gives Esther and Mordecai some permission to do some things.
On the third month, that is the month Sivan, on the 23rd day, it was written according to all that Mordecai commanded to the Jews, the satraps, the governors, and all the people. And he wrote in the name of King Ahasuerus, and he sealed it with the king's signet ring, and he sent it out by the same couriers who had just 2 months before carried out the decree. And he said, and then the king granted the Jews who were in each and every city the right to assemble and to defend their lives, to destroy, to kill, and to annihilate the entire army of any people or province which might attack them, including children and women, and to plunder their spoil. And they can do this on the same day that they were to be annihilated. And so now there is a path out of this. There's a path for everybody. The king is still going to get his head tax because other people now, people in the provinces who see what's happened and people who are not Jewish by birth decide to come along beside the Jews and help them because they know that if they don't, then they can be killed by the Jewish people. You know, shoes on the other foot now, real fast. And so the king knows that these people will come along beside the Jewish people and they will help them out by helping them with the monetary money, the money that they need to pay the tax. And this way, the king will get his coffers filled, the Jews will be allowed to live, and everybody should live happily ever after. So this is how it worked out. And so we see here in chapter 9, says, verse 2 says, Jews assembled in their cities throughout all the provinces of King Ahasuerus to lay hands on those who sought their harm, and no one could stand before them, for the dread of them had fallen on all the peoples. Same story as Rahab. The dread of them, the fear, the terror of them, because when it comes down to it, when it comes down to the last degree, people have to recognize that the Jews are favored by God. Even though we have people in society, God help us, people in society like Hitler, who tried to annihilate them, he didn't get it done. He killed a lot of them, but he didn't kill all of them. And now God has brought them back, and they're very, very strong. And then in verse 4 says, Indeed, Mordecai was great in the king's house, and his fame spread throughout all the provinces, for the man Mordecai became greater and greater. Thus the Jews struck all their enemies with the sword, killing and destroying, and they did what they pleased to those who hated them. Hatred is an ugly thing. It's an ugly thing. And if you hate someone, even if you pretend for the moment that you don't hate them, that hatred still comes through. It reeks, it stinks, and it's there, and people know it's there. And so Mordecai knew who those people were that hated the Jews. And so they just wiped them out. Again, shoe was on the other foot. Those who wanted to destroy the Jews were now being destroyed by the Jews. And then we go on and we see that this becomes a fast and a feast day. Verse 19, chapter 9 says, Therefore the Jews of the rural areas who live in the rural towns make the 14th day of the month Adar a holiday for rejoicing and fasting and feasting and sending portions of food to one another. Now, I think I have time here to tell you a little story. In Israel, the children go on at Purim. This is where the Feast of Purim comes from, is the story of Esther. And remember, that was the lot that they cast, the little die that they threw. Purim is plural. So Purim. On Purim in Israel, they go around, they dress up in biblical costume. Haman and Esther, Mordecai, all these people. Not very many people dress as Haman because he didn't last. And then they make these hamantaschen, these little triangular shaped hats that are filled with preserves like apricot or poppy seed or some kind of a really nice dessert. And they make these little hats, and then children run around in their costumes, and they ring your doorbell and they give you sweets instead of ringing your doorbell and saying trick or treat. And it's really a delightful, delightful tradition. We have experienced this many times in Israel. And one time David and I were in Israel, and he was very sick, and we were going to have to leave and go home for the doctor appointment. And I really felt like I needed to go down to the wall and pray before we left, because we needed to hear God's direction. And I went down to the Old City, parked in the Old City parking lot, and walked down the steps to the Western Wall to pray. And when I came back through the Jewish quarter, I just had such a delightful time because it was Purim. And all these people were dressed in costume. And now they're adding things to it. I saw adorable ladybugs and all kinds of things. But it's good costumes. It's not scary stuff like we have, like trick or treat. It's not witches and goblins and stuff like that. It's biblical characters, and it's not scary stuff, princesses and that kind of thing. And so that's the good part of our tradition that's jumped off there. But what we see this is the giving out, the celebrating. And then the Jews, they go to synagogue. We've gone to some delightful Purim parties at our friend's house, and everybody dresses up in costumes. We've dressed in costumes. We've taken some gear over with us to dress in costumes. We go to the Purim party, and we eat until we can't eat anymore, and we drink, and we have a good time. And then on the morning of Purim, they go to the synagogue and they read the Torah scroll, the book of Esther, twice, the Megillah Esther, twice. And I asked my friend, why do you read it twice? And he said, because we can. Because we're free now, and we can read it twice. And I think that's great. So that's the story of Esther that I wanted to share with you. It took a little longer than I thought, but sometimes that happens. And again, Genesis Triangle, one of the books that I've written that I think you would really like. And there's another one too. This is a personal story, a life story. This is about when my husband got sick. It's called Who Will Kill the Spiders? And it's about when my husband got sick and how we dealt with the situation, how we went from running to catch an airplane to, oops, we crashed. Not literally, but physically, we crashed. And so I wanted to just share this with you. Thank you for being with me today. And Shalom, Yerushalayim. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem.